first off, thanks again for everybody joining the Asphalt Pavement Association of Michigan webinar. Called this an associate member spotlight. I am particularly very interested in learning with everybody today about LASTRADA. Having lived in the quality control world for a number of years working for the contractor, I'm always interested in solutions that help take the information, the data that we're already collecting, and how to leverage that information to, one, improve efficiency, two, increase profits, and three, hopefully all at the same time, reduce our risk out there. So that is the name of the game. So it's always nice to see how we can take that information and look at it different ways and make decisions that hopefully make the folks in the QC department look like rock stars. So with that, I will get things started here, offering some professional development hours. So we'll go ahead and send out the certificates to everybody. If you don't need them, then you can just disregard. We're looking at probably an hour for this webinar. The only stipulation that we require is that you attend 85% of the total event, so we can make sure that you in fact get your PDH information, and that we're signing off that you are in fact there live and in person. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter. Our one and only presenter today is Dan Rodolfi. He's the president at LASTRADA Partners. He had a nice bio here, which I forgot to print out, but so I'm going to ad-lib Dan. So Dan has, I probably should look that up. You can always introduce yourself if I forget something, but I guess probably the most important thing that I've always liked talking with Dan about is his contractor background. So he not only has lived in that contractor world where you are trying to do those things, increase efficiency, increase profits, and reduce risk. So he comes at this whole problem solution from a very unique perspective, and one that I certainly appreciate. So I think he's going to be able to really speak to those that are currently operating in that industry and provide some very good information with that. So with that, Dan, I'll turn it over to you. I will stop sharing and let you screen share. And you are on top of it. I will turn my camera off and let you go forth.
Great. Well, thanks, Brett. I really appreciate you making time for us. We really enjoy talking quality control and talking about LASTRADA as our product. You had mentioned that about having backgrounds, and actually maybe I'll get to that in the next slide, about why LASTRADA Partners exists as a company. So well, again, thank you again. I appreciate everyone's time who's on the call today, and then anyone who's going to be watching this later on. Again, my name is Dan Rodolfi. I'm the president of LASTRADA Partners, based here in California, with a partner organization in Berlin, Germany. So today we want to talk about three things. We want to talk about some of the things that are required from us to make sure that LASTRADA will comply with the specifications in Michigan. So even if you're using Excel, just going through some of these details might help you just look at your own spreadsheets and make sure that you're up to snuff with all the intricacies of the Michigan specification. The second thing we want to do is we want to talk about just the daily work. You've got things that you have to do every day as part of your daily work, and we want to make sure that, as what I like to say is table stakes, that anything you're doing, whether it's LASTRADA or Excel, it should lighten the load and make that go faster. And then lastly, and really the prime focus of today's discussion is, you've got all of this information. So if we're going to use a relational database like LASTRADA, how do we look beyond the one sample? How do we look at all of the tests we have in a day on a product at a plant with particular aggregate products, with particular settings? And how do we put that to work so that we do all the things that Brett said. We become more efficient, we save money, we create opportunities, we mitigate risk, and then when you do all those things, you can either take those things as margin on the project, or you can give yourself a bid day advantage. So in today's discussion, I really want to focus on that, about getting those advantages either on in terms of margin on a project or taking them on bid day. Brett, I think you would encourage people to reach out and talk, and I think the primary way is to raise your hand or put something in chat. I definitely want this to be a discussion. I've printed the Michigan specifications. We have users of LASTRADA in Michigan, but I am by no means an expert in the specifications in Michigan. And I would love to hear sort of your thoughts on how things are done, and just sort of collaborate a little bit and discuss, some ways that you can take advantage of the situation you're in, because every specification, even though they may be difficult or they may have challenges in certain areas to meet, there are always opportunities too. So I'd like to have that live discussion as well. If we go over in time, we go over in time. I haven't prepared a bunch of slides, so this should be, we should have plenty of time to have a good discussion. So here's our contact information. You can call us, although the only people who calls us anymore are spam calls. You can email info@LASTRADA Partners. Multiple people, Sean, our salesperson, myself, Alexis from our office, we're always monitoring that email address. So if you want to drop us a note, ask a question, please feel free to do that. We've got our main website, LASTRADAPartners.com. We've got a YouTube channel with quite a bit of information about the software, as well as we have about a half dozen solutions to common problems, most of which come from our consulting business, where we have been asked to help somebody resolve a problem, and then we went ahead and solved it for them. And we went ahead and we've since then created a video about the problem, the solution, and sort of the technical aspects behind that. You'll find that on the YouTube channel. You can also find it on our website on the resources page. And then lastly, we have a LinkedIn page as well. So just a quick bit about LASTRADA. LASTRADA was first written in 1985 by Dr. Hermann Young in Berlin, Germany. The company actually begins when the Berlin Wall comes down. Dr. Young was a professor of informatics, and when the Berlin Wall came down, they created an opportunity. He and his brother decided, along with a third partner, that the construction materials business needed software, needed a relational database, and that was the inception of LASTRADA. In 2015, LASTRADA came over to the U.S. Matthey Construction out of Onalaska, Wisconsin, convinced Dr. Young and partners in Germany that U.S. is a place they should be working. And then 2 years later, in 2017, we formed LASTRADA Partners. And LASTRADA Partners, just to kind of build on what Brett said, is, we want to be practitioners, as well as practitioners of, I'll call it materials engineering, as well as practitioners of software, so that we can have a collaborative discussion. I enjoy talking about plants. I enjoy talking about looking for opportunities to take optimize a plant, reduce costs, increase productivity, whether it's crew productivity or plant productivity. If you're vertically integrated, those things can compete with each other a little bit. So just having those discussions and finding solutions is something that personally is excites me and something I enjoy doing. And so we built a company around that's designed to do that. So we do offer some consulting services, fairly limited. If you have a claim against a DOT and you want an expert witness, there I can give you lots of phone numbers. But if you've got a plant and you're sitting on some products you're having a hard time selling, and you want to try to get them in your hot mix and ensure you still produce the same quality materials, that's definitely something we can help you with. Okay. So in our agenda here, oops, am I going the right way? So let's go ahead and we'll start our agenda with the best practices for data analysis. And I'm going to be flipping around screens and looking, so I'm going to temporarily shut my camera off while we get going here. So I'm going to start by opening LASTRADA. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our production module. And I want to show you, I'm going to go find a sample for a company I created called Detroit Paving. I grabbed a random sample from a Michigan project and put it into this database for today's demonstration. So I want to go through and just show you all of the bits and pieces that exist in LASTRADA specifically for Michigan. And I'll talk through what those do. And again, if you're using Excel, make sure that you check some of these boxes in your own Excel file. So let's start with what we call special rounding in LASTRADA. I'm accessing the mix design that sits behind the sample from the sample itself. And this is what we call a declaration. A declaration in LASTRADA's terms are, it is a mixed design assigned to a facility or a specification assigned to a facility with component products. In the declaration in LASTRADA, we have all sorts of information, which I'll get to. But I want to point out at this moment what we call regional settings. So we've got a Michigan regional setting, and what does this do? Specifically, what it does for Michigan is most volumetric measures are to the 100th, I think gradations to the 10th, and then the mathematical calculations of volumetrics are done using a special rounding on the halves. So when you pick Michigan, LASTRADA will follow all of those rules. So the volumetrics will be calculated to the proper significant digits. The reporting will be and the calculations will be done using the specific rounding rules. So this regional setting is available in both of the mixed design module and in the production module. One more bit of work that's coming out is in our core data entry. We're supporting the 1/8 inch increments on core thicknesses for filling that. The next thing I want to show you is our 1903C form, which the next we've put in a setting in our template tools, basically for all templates now in the Asphalt module. You have to put 100s and zeros for the sieves that don't have data. So we've added that so that everything comes out complete to the state DOT's requirements. Within the sample itself, if I go back to the sample, we've added here, if I look at the sample, we've added the ability to redistribute the sieve loss per the state's requirements of sieve analysis. My understanding of the test method is that in this case, we've got a 0.04% sieve loss, which in T27 C136 is allowable. It's under the 0.5%. But in Michigan, we want that to be 0. And when I press this button here, it'll say, I'm getting this tooltip saying sieve loss will be added to the heaviest sieve. So when I hit this button, it's taking that 0.4, finding the sieve with the largest amount of material retained, and then adding that 0.4 loss to there. And now our sieve loss is 0. And we've now meet the requirement for gradation loss. Within the sample as well, when we look at binder content by solvent, we have a Michigan specific setup where we're following the specific steps that are required in Michigan. It's the same procedure, roughly the same procedure that's used for solvent extractions nationwide, but there's a couple of different things that are measured together. So we wanted to make sure that we had this supported in LASTRADA. And then we have a few optional settings that have come up by the people using LASTRADA in Michigan. It doesn't appear to be in the current specifications. It seems to be some legacy, but it's important in any case to have it. Number one, if I have a binder content, if I have a RICE test in LASTRADA, a GMM, and I have the mixed design GSE, I can have LASTRADA calculate for me the theoretical binder content to compare that to the actual binder content of the test. Presumably, we're even for people that aren't in Michigan, this is kind of a nice, powerful piece of functionality. I get a binder content test. I think I'm running on target. I've been on target all day, and then I get one test that just is out to lunch. The way that we can check that is we compare that to the rice, right? Because the aggregate gravity isn't changing that much from sample to sample, and therefore the effective specific gravity of the aggregate should be fairly stable. So this retrieve calculate button is essentially saying, okay, if I know the specific gravity of the aggregate, my rice is telling me my binder content's at 6.04. Is this a significant deviation? I'm going to answer the question by saying, I don't know. I haven't been around the plant. I haven't haven't used this functionality a lot, haven't compared a lot to it. It feels a little high. I'd probably want it to be a little closer in this case, but it's really hard to say without a little bit of experience behind it. So again, this button here, even if you're not in Michigan, is a nice clean way to say, well, does my rice and my binder content agree with each other? And if they do, you probably want to skip the hey, I'm going to go run that test again and go straight to, well, what do we need to adjust? Is there something going on? Whereas in this case, if it were me not knowing what I know, which is very little, I would probably rerun the binder content test if this was not, if it's off, if I think this 5.66 is way too far off the target, considering where I've been all day long. Okay, the next thing is going back to the mix design in the declaration. So declaration again is sort of the mix design that underlies a sample. In the aggregate section, you have the ability to define the GSE given to you by MDOT. So in this particular case, the effective specific gravity of the aggregate in the mix design calculated to 2.739, but the DOT is saying that based on their testing, they would like you to use 742. And when you do that, then LASTRADA will first look to see if there's a DOT provided GSE. And then when we're calculating volumetrics like filler to binder, it will use the DOT provided number as opposed to calculating that same value on the sample itself. And then the last thing I want to point out is the last little bit of investment is what I just showed you earlier, which is essentially we went ahead and used the template toolbox and we completed a 1903C form for people to submit to their customers. And I think that this X here, I don't know if this is part of the form itself. It may be something that we added just as a little aside for the customer, just so that they could visually see where things are, where things may be out of specification. So before I move on and go to actually a little bit more of the daily work, is there any questions to some of the changes or the things that LASTRADA flexes to do for Michigan?
Yeah, as a reminder, if you guys have questions, just use the chat or shoot me an email, text, whatever, and we'll get you unmuted so you can ask the question, or you can ask it via chat. I guess while we're waiting or opening up the door for questions, Dan, I'll ask one. I mean, you talked a fair amount about mixture results here in LASTRADA. What about aggregate production? Is that something?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the same rounding rules, you can apply them in the aggregate module. So the basically what to do when you you calculate to a half. We have a setting here that says on halves round to even numbers. So if I have an aggregate product I'm producing in Michigan, I can tell the software, hey, treat this as a Michigan product, as well as that same sieve loss distribution is coming out as well, is available in the aggregate production module.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Brett. And I would also say I think I said it earlier. Those features also are in the mixed design module as well. Okay.
Yeah, right. I think we're good to go. I don't see any other questions.
All right. So talking about daily work. So what does it take to fill out a 1903C? It is exactly what I said. So I'm a technician. I've got my sample. I've created it for the day. I need to go back and I need to fill my 1903C and turn it in, whether it's to the DOT directly, whether it's going to go to a supervisor. In LASTRADA, you'll find everywhere it's a template-driven software package, and this button that says Edit Document or Print Document opens it up, and I've created a little folder of sheets today for our presentation. I pick the 1903C, and it completes it. LASTRADA is, when we talk about LASTRADA and templates, it's much like Excel. If I double click here and I activate the table, you can see I can click on a column here and I can insert columns, I can remove columns, I can adjust widths. Um, it, I can I can come here and I can change the font, for example, of this. It's not exactly like Excel. It's got its own approach to things. The key difference is when I look at, let's say, the mixed design number here, and I hit what we call a cell type, this is essentially a connection to the database. So when you're working on templates, um, you are going to work exactly like you're doing in Excel, and then you're going to add what we call cell types, so that when I go to fill it, when I hit that fill template button, the Lastrada knows, or the software knows, hey, I need the type test number for this product. Or over here, I need the name of the contract. Or over here, I need to know the construction site area, or I need to know the job number. And the software will fill it out for you. And then it gets even more detailed. I need to know the admissible range. I need to know the action internal limits or the action range. And with a little bit of work, and you can basically make a 1903C like we did, or probably more. What happens realistically, it's that you take this form and you say, well, in my company, we don't want your logo on there, for example. You should change that or remove it altogether. Like I said, we added these little X's. I'm fairly certain we added those. But if you wanted to do other things, if you wanted to add something, if you wanted to actually add a signature, not do what I've done here, which is just add a font that looks like a signature, that could be done. And it's in your control. So people just go to our help desk, they download this form, and then they modify it to meet their own needs. Okay. So when I was looking at the specifications, um, I want to talk a little bit about the single test acceptance. Um, so I saw that you complete your 1903C, you have this form to fill out. And I asked a few people, and there was not total consensus whether you fill it, send it to the state puts their numbers in, or whether the state puts their numbers in, and then you put your own numbers in. I'm not sure which way it goes. But in any case, because there's a requirement that you have to be within a certain range of the state, this spreadsheet is essentially calculating that difference for you. Well, like I said, we want to take advantage of the tools in Lastrada, and we want to just get your daily work done and move on. So what I did for today's presentation, and if there are any Lastrada users on the call today, just shoot me a note and I will send this to you. But I went ahead and I built a spreadsheet. I built a report for here. So this sheet allows us, and actually this was Brett's idea. I have to give him the credit for this. He made a comment. He said, "What if you could just fill out an Excel file simply?" Okay, well, we should. So this has multiple samples on it. And in the Lastrada world, when we want multiple samples, we use we just use statistics. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick the Detroit paving plant. I'm going to get my one sample. But now I'm going to not fill out my 1903C. I'm going to fill out this single test acceptance worksheet. And now I've got the sheet laid out. I mean, it doesn't look like much, right? I mean, it's just this information with very little header information. But the key here is I would click here, I would export to Excel, then I just copy the information, and you'll notice the layout of my template is exactly the same as this report. And I don't know if I can get them together, but I can do a single copy paste. I can copy and I can paste everything into here, and then I can copy again and paste everything into here, and then the sheet will complete for me. So I should be able to do 2 copy pastes for multiple samples at once and get this completed. So that's the power of the template, and we should really these are opportunities to make, making sure, again, if you're doing it even in your own Excel file, putting a little thought up front and making sure that you are thinking about all the little processes you go through that add busy work, that'll getting that done and behind you as quickly as possible is going to allow you to do that high value work for the plant that you're working at. So this took me about 45 minutes to do using an existing sheet, and we could do the same thing for the PWL projects as well. All right, so let's move into data analysis and PWL projects, because on a data analysis in LASTRADA and the PWL projects are going to be one and the same as we talk through it. So let me open a couple of images, just real quick review, and I apologize because this is probably, everybody knows what it means to be within PWL or percent within limits. So when we talk about PWL, what we're saying mathematically is this vertical line is my lower specification limit, this vertical line is my upper specification limit, and I've got a whole bunch of test results that I've run. And we're mathematically calculating of those test results statistically what percentage of that information is between this vertical line and that vertical line. And then you take that percent within limit, you go to the state spreadsheet or you go to a table, and it will then convert that percent within limit to be to a basically pay factor. And this is where the in my opinion, this is where people really, you can start to see differentiation in level of sophistication of companies, because companies who understand how to maximize percent within limits, obviously on a project that has a statistical pay acceptance, they have an advantage. But when I'm looking at optimizing mix designs, by keeping deviations down, I actually create opportunities as well. So, and what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. Here in California, the feed aggregates are tested for sand equivalent like concrete aggregates are. And if my sand equivalent, I have a minimum sand equivalent of 47 to 50, somewhere in there. And if my sand equivalent on my crush fines is ranging from 15 to 50 or 15 to 70, what number am I going to use to determine what am I going to assign to that? And if I have another product that tends to be dirtier, well, if my crusher fines are running near 70, that's not a problem. But if my crusher fines are running near 15, that's a huge problem. So by creating a narrow deviation of sand equivalent, it then establishes what I can do in terms of other products to blend into it. Because if I have that big deviation, it's going to be it's going to be an interesting discussion internally about how much am I going to have to wash and put in my mix. Because if it's at 70, the answer is 0. If it's at 15, the answer is quite a bit. So it's a very simplistic way to look at it, but understanding setting internal limits or setting limits that are important to you, and then understanding your ability to meet those limits is critical to finding opportunities to optimize your plant. So in the world that I was in, we always set a tight control on sand equivalent of our manufactured products because we wanted to minimize the amount of washed manufactured product that we used. So going back to the specifications in Michigan, so if I want to maximize these, I need to go ahead and look at the percent within limits of the products I'm making. Oops, wrong LASTRADA. So I can do that by looking at, I'll switch plants here to the Yellowstone plant, open this up. I'll hit search. I'm going to come back to this, but I want you to notice here, we've got these labels here as verification samples. So these are DOT samples. And we can use that to compare our results to the state results. So I'm just to save time, I'm going to go ahead and just look at a pre-run report. So when I look at this sample here, or this product and those samples for this plant, I'm using LASTRADA to calculate percent within limit. So there's two elements to percent within limit. Number one, where is my average? Is my average in the middle? Is it on the edge? Is it not? Because if my average sits here and my frequency distribution curve is over here, you should automatically assume that a bunch of information will be deficient. So the first thing is, let's look at deviation. This product has a deviation on the number 4 sieve, so it's a spec sieve. This is not a Michigan product anymore. Has a standard deviation of 2.75. So if we double that, the average deviation, we should expect the data to be plus or minus 5 and 5.5. The specifications are 41 to 51. So that's a 10%, it's a 5% deviation in either direction. So it's the deviation that we're measuring or experiencing is on par with what's allowable in the spec. I mean, we're a little more, but 11, doubling the 5.5, comparing that to the 10 that's allowable is not bad. But our percent within specification is only, or percent within limits is only 42%. Why is that? Well, our average is 52, and our JMF target is 46. So our upper maximum allowable is 51, and we're averaging 52. So if I go back to this line here, this dashed line is actually to the left. And the 41% in spec is the half of the frequency distribution that is landing over here. So not very much. If that's a heavily weighted PASIV, that's a problem. In fact, in most specifications, that's probably rejectable if this is a spec item. But if I go to my number 200s, I'm 99%. I'm essentially 100% on my binder. My air voids are 97. I'm 0 on VMA. And that is because our mean is 12.7 and our lower limit is 15. So not even the tailing test results touch the VMA. And then on VFA, we're 57. So I chose this as an example to kind of show you some extremes. Clearly, this material that I'm using as an example that data was provided to us is not subject to percent within limits. I suspect that they get paid on binder and 200 because look how tight they are. And same thing with air voids. And these other values are left out. So they are focusing their efforts in to the items that make the most sense to them. Okay. So if I were a plant and I were using PWL, if I were producing PWL projects, this report would be pretty critical, would be very critical in terms of making sure that I look at what I'm doing. You also have charting options too, so you can build your own charts. This particular chart report, the charts aren't the most amazing, but you could also chart that as well. And if I were using LASTRADA, now what is the best practice? the best practice is really making sure that it's an automatic thing that your company is looking at the deviations, because the deviations affect pay directly on these PWL jobs, and the deviations affect your ability to find opportunities to optimize. So in LASTRADA, we have an automatic reporting feature. So you would come in here and you'd say, look, if I want to do this every day or every week, I would add a new line. I would call it, I'll call it the Michigan example. And then I want to do asphalt statistics. And then I build like, hey, I want to show the last 5 samples if I'm doing it every day. Maybe I want to do it for every week. And I'm going to pick a distribution list. And probably what is really nice in the LASTRADA software is you're not locked into any one template. If this plant, for example, like the example I showed you, if they don't care about the number 4 sieve and they don't care about the others, I would wipe it off of the sheet, and I would make sure that we're only showing what's most important. You don't want analysis paralysis. You want people to be focused in on those things that they can control and add value to the business. And then you would just go through and you'd pick the template that you want. So it's you don't want to be looking at data when you have a problem or when you're bidding work. You want to be looking at your data continuously as things are happening, so that when you got to have that job, or there's a really important job that's bidding nearby and it's a good job for you, you've got an advantage, and you want to make sure that nobody comes in and gets stupid cheap on you and takes it. You're going to want to know what your opportunities are. You're going to want to know what you can and can't do. And looking at these things on a daily basis, or at least regularly, and not limiting it just to the QC people, is really important. Okay. If I go back to the single test acceptance again, and I look at this here, this results, and I made a comment that we have verification as well as our own QC tests. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select these samples, and then I'm going to run a report that we have in LASTRADA. So even if I'm not doing statistical acceptance, the state gave us an STA worksheet that we have to do. So when I'm doing this, I'm essentially looking backwards, and I've got some dispute opportunities here to help me, get some relief if there's a potential problem. But really, if you're going to be taking advantage of this, you're already losing, because you're delaying the project. That crew that could be paving a job this job is got to find something else to do, and there's new mobilizations that may or may not be in your estimate. So going to dispute is a technique for getting relief, but it's not necessarily where you want to go, just because it wreaks havoc on schedules and whatnot. And if you're a QC person specifically, it kind of makes your life miserable. It's stuff that you never planned and you have to deal with. So what we suggest is, again, even if you're using the state spreadsheet, I would add your own tab to it, and I would start comparing your numbers to the state numbers. So this is that same data set where we saw the low PWLs. But in this report, we're comparing this plant's lot 1, sublot 1 in black to the state's lot 1, sublot 1. And if we look at the items that were really important, right, we saw that this particular company was hyper focused on binder content, air voids, and 200s. So we would do the same thing here. We would look at, binder content, air voids, and 200s to make sure that we don't anticipate a problem. And in this style of report in LASTRADA, we have the ability to look at it graphically. So if I zoom out a little bit, so here's my binder content. The blue dots are my numbers. The black dots, here's the scale at the bottom, by the way. The verification is blue, I'm sorry. My results are black. So my results are looking good, and my numbers and the state numbers almost trend. So sometimes they were the state was higher than me during this range. State's lower to me on one day, but they generally, in this case, the state is a little higher than I am. Therefore, if I'm running binder content tests on an STA project and my maximum allowable deviation from my target is 0.4, I should not be happy with a 0.3 because I should expect the state is going to be 0.4 away. Because just looking at historically, they're going to be higher than I am. If I look at air voids, it looks to be, for the most part, we're trending with each other. There's no clear definition. On this one, it's pretty clear. We should expect the state to have a higher number than us. So we probably need to set a limit internally that if the maximum allowable is 5.4, we should probably take action at 5.3 or lower because we should expect the state number to come back higher than ours and could cause issues. And then if I just look at this VMA chart, you can see for the most part, the VMA numbers are, the trends are tracking, especially starting on this lot 1, sublot 4. You can see they really are starting to track each other very, very well. So I might take this information and for my own benefit, kind of say to myself, well, look, my changes that I'm making at the plant are reflected in the state's numbers. So there's not an issue with the results being different. They're close. Sometimes they're higher. Sometimes they're lower in this case. But the trend seems to match, which is really about all you can ask for. And this would be another approach that I would take, especially if I'm doing a lot of these single test acceptance projects. This piece of information is extremely valuable. I would, if it were me, I would adjust my internal limits for production based on this piece of information. This is actionable. We can look at the numbers here and say, well, what are the differences? 4.3 versus 4.7, so 4/10ths difference. 4.7 versus 4.8, a tenth. 4.4 versus 4.6, 2/10ths. 4.6 versus 4.3, 4.4 versus 4.6. In every case except for one, we're at least 2/10ths. So if I were in LASTRADA or if I'm in my own sheet, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at my acceptance. And I have these internal limits for binder. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, look, I want to flag when we get to 6.2. If 4/10ths is our allowable range, I want to know when we get to 6.4 because I expect the DOT to be higher than I am. So when we look at data analysis, so what are some of the best practices now? So let's get a little bit away from the Michigan spec and let's just take a 30,000 foot view of how people use plant data for the benefit of their plant. So let's look at a report that we built as a consulting project where somebody said to us, our cost to produce was high. And we were looking at their, sorry, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We started looking at aggregates and other things, and we noticing that they had failing binder contents once a month. So I combined, let's hear construction site. We'll call it the Napa Highway. So I'm going to search. Change the date range. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to pull data on one project, and this is all fake data, by the way. And I'm going to go ahead and say, look, I want to compare this plant to this plant. And this plant labeled El Dorado Hills is an actual client that said, well, our cost to produce is high. So when we started looking at their failures, so they use a competing product and they got an email once a month that said that their binder content was, we want to merge per mix design. they got an email once a month that said their binder content was good or out of spec. So in their eyes, they were saying, okay, look, we are out of spec only once a month, high five. But when I look at the same mix design out of two different plants, this report here, we call the binder deviation report. This, I don't know what the target is on this project or for this mix design, but this red 00 line is my target. This black line is my running average of 4 tests. So that's why you don't see anything until the 5th. At no point in time do you see any of these samples on target. And at no time in the same date range, let me zoom in so you can see, the tolerance is plus or minus 0.4. And there's only one day where they're out of spec on sample 23. So again, in all of these samples, they only have one failing binder content, and they considered it a success. If I take the other plant that I grabbed and look at the same data set, notice these guys were running high and then they immediately brought it right back down on target. So when you're looking at single tests, you tend to fall into this trap of, look, I get 0.4 deviation, but I'm only at 0.2, good for us. We're in spec. But the reality is it's costing us money, especially in 2022. I don't know what the buy haul is, or I don't know what the rack price of binder is, but in California, where I sit currently, it is about $750 a ton FOB the terminal. So it does not include freight, and that's not polymer modified. So you can imagine at $750 a ton, this is really valuable. So if I'm looking at my data, well, what are my expensive products? Don't be satisfied with compliance, because compliance is being complacent. In this case, it was complacency. These guys are all over it. They trend it up, they bring themselves back down. And remember, these are rolling averages. So to bring the number down means that they're actually getting on target. So no one test result is affecting this black line. It's another best practice. Use rolling averages, because how many times have you been sitting in a conference room with a production person or with somebody else, and there's one test that's off, that appears to be out to lunch. It may or may not be out to lunch, but doesn't follow any of the trends. And you end up having this conversation about, well, that test is wrong. Okay, well, it might be wrong. And then it sort of throws shade on the whole issue at hand and the whole process. Well, if you use rolling averages, that one test result has a much lesser effect than the previous 4 or 5, depending on how many you choose to average. So we highly recommend, when you're looking at samples, that you always look at rolling averages. And for the LASTRADA users on the call, that's what this button does. This is not going to work because we only have one data point. In LASTRADA, you use this button here to actually show your individual result relative to the previous. And then you have the ability to pick how many you want to look at a time and so on. Okay, so that's the first thing, is find the items that are valuable or have value to the business, focus on those, look at them regularly, and use moving averages to smooth out the influence of any one test. The second thing we're seeing a lot of is, I need to open up another LASTRADA and bring it over. So when we see companies that are looking at their plant settings while they are producing material, and especially when they're doing it in Excel, number one, it shows that somebody's very skilled in Excel, and number two, there's a level of understanding. So here's another project that we consulted on. And when I'm in LASTRADA, I have the ability to say, when I was in the sample, I had the ability to say, look, I'm running this mix SP1, or these are all the mixes. But I also have the ability to not only pick the mix, but I can also pick how I've got the plant set up for that mix. And when I do that, I'm able to get higher order reporting. So here's an example of a client that was actually doing a mix design with a plant. They were doing well. Their original plant settings were here 11, 63, 6, and 20 on their products. And immediately they made a change to 12, 56. So they dropped this by 8%, completely removed the rock dust, and increased 12% on the manufactured sand. In that example I talked to you about earlier about the sand equivalent, the price of this mix just went up by $1.50 easily. Washed material versus unwashed material. So, and then you can see on the 14th, they made a change, took a sample. They made another change and took 2 samples. They made another change. They took 2 more samples. 4 days later, they made another change, took 4 samples. And then the same day, they made another change and they took even more samples. This is an extreme case with a plant that's just trying to get themselves back in spec and get themselves back in the good graces of the owner. But if I'm hauling in material from either my own facility or an outside facility, if I look at my QC data against my plant settings, if I'm always changing my manufactured sand up and down against my natural sand, or my manufactured sand and my washed manufactured sand in this case, if those two are always being blended against each other, again, I'm in spec, everything's good. There's a message there. Like, why am I having to increase and decrease the manufactured sand? I can peel the onion back a little bit and decide for myself whether there's an opportunity on the manufacturing of the manufactured sand, no pun intended, or the wash manufactured sand, to prevent myself from making changes. I don't have an example queued up, but sometimes plants will click along with no failures, no emails. Data looks really consistent in the statistics report, and everyone's happy. But then you run a report like this, and the QC group and the production group are making 2 plant changes a day. High five to those guys and gals for staying on top of their plant and producing a very, very consistent product. But if you're having to work that hard, think about all that skill that's going in there to make you stay in spec. What if you took that same skill and asked them to make a product that was same quality but lower cost? So that company is probably not getting the most out of their QC people and their production people, because those people are focused on staying in spec. And I don't have an example of that for you. And then just
Dan,
yeah,
sorry, not to cut you short, but we're
yeah.
about 3 minutes from cutoff time. So I don't know how much more you have. I didn't know if we wanted to
I've got
get people
30
thinking about
seconds.
asking questions and stuff like that, so we don't go
Okay,
too
yeah,
long. But
cool.
yeah, I guess I have. So those of you out there in attendance, feel free to again chat, raise your hand. We can unmute you. You can ask live. Lots of good information here. Very powerful tool. I guess is while we're waiting for some others to maybe chime in. I guess I was thinking with all of these options here, with all of this control and data, what kind of training options are available for, say, technicians getting involved in LASTRADA? Because this is a great tool, but like I said, I could just see people coming unglued throwing this at them. So, but I'm just like any other software, it takes training to get up to speed. But I'm just curious if you could talk a bit more about onboarding of the process and what you've seen. How do technicians take to this? And if there's anybody else out there in attendance land that's using it, feel free to also provide some input.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer the question, but I see Joe Schur on here. He's a user. If they want to comment, but the short answer, Brett, is we have a process we call Fast Track, which is mini procedures for every step of the way of getting the software set up. And then we have use procedures, and the use procedures are how to use it. And with customers at their request, we will help them make for them, I should say, a use procedure that actually is geared to the way that they use LASTRADA. And inside of LASTRADA, on all of the screens, we have these, this mixture page is a good example. We have these configuration options, and notice that I've got all of these items. These red X's are things that I've shut off. And I'm actually logged. I've got another version of LASTRADA going here for a technician named Jill. And if you look at Jill's menus, like her menus are a lot less than what you saw on mine. And when Jill looks at things like KPI, so looking at the variability of our products, we've taken the standard view from the software, and we've pared it down to a very simplistic view. So she can say, oh, my percent within spec is 82%, and the red line is my allowable limit, and the green is my deviation. So she can visually see, oh, my issue is we're averaging too far to the high side, and our deviation is probably exactly what it is in the spec. We need to bring this down or get tighter on specification. So we have quite a few self-service training options is the short answer, Brett, as well as we get heavily involved in getting procedures written and use documents for our customers.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. I think Joe just responded. We haven't gotten to the point of enough data for analysis, but that is why we chose LASTRADA over other spreadsheets. You have lots of disconnected data. Yeah, I mean, me as a data guy, I could certainly see my my winter getting even busier, geeking out on all this data and figuring out how to what to do with it and stuff like that. So, very, very powerful tool. So if there's any other questions out there, feel free to chime in. And I'll, in the interest of time to start, just want to thank Dan for spending some time here this morning going through LASTRADA. Dan's contact information is down here at the bottom. We'll also plan on sending it out in the follow-up email with the recording as it's attached. And so I'm sure he'd love to take the conversation one-on-one with anybody who wants to talk about more. I'm sure that was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. So I guess if there's any other questions, feel free to chime in. We're planning on having more associate member spotlight webinars later this fall, get into some additives and stuff like that. So there'll be more information out on that. But if you have any questions about LASTRADA, certainly feel free to reach out to us. I can put you in contact with Dan and Sean and the folks over there at LASTRADA to get you more information. And stay tuned for the recording as well as the PDH information. So, Dan, do you have anything else? Any closing words?
No.
Sorry to cut you short there. I think you probably had a bunch more things to talk about, but I just wanted to make sure we stayed as close to time as we advertised. So.
No. I appreciate you keeping us on task, and just thank you for the opportunity. We, like I said, we're pretty passionate about asphalt QC. You know, it's kind of our business. It's what I've grown up at. I will say I don't miss the 2 a.m. phone calls, and I don't envy those of you on the phone who are still responsible for a plant. But we enjoy the opportunity to talk about QC and LASTRADA. So thank you, Brett, for putting this together.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you all for attending again, and stay tuned for more information on other webinars as well as information on this particular webinar. And hopefully you enjoyed it. And with that, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy if you're in the Michigan or greater Midwest area. Enjoy this beautiful weather we're having here, and we will talk to you in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.